Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to Two Toe Tag's Metal Reviews. And to cap off our entire week of black metal anniversary reviews, we are going to review the ever so notable De Mysteriis Don Sathanas by Mayhem. So we saved probably the most well-known or most notorious
Easily the most notorious.
black metal band
Easily.
for the ending of this crazy week of anniversary reviews for black metal, Mayhem. And this is the album that kind of, like, their notoriety came from this specific one as well.
And the events that kind of surrounded it, of course.
Yeah, like anything you've heard about Mayhem, any of the crazy stuff, it all had to do with this record. So, what are your thoughts?
Well, this is one of the albums that I'm not new to. I've listened to this album before. I wouldn't say I'm super familiar with it or anything like that. But it is also probably the only Mayhem album I've ever listened to. I don't think I've ever listened to any of their other stuff. I didn't check out any of their demos or anything like that. So there was a familiarity to this album for me. So it had been a while. And after we've been listening to all this other black metal, I kind of almost forgot what this one sounded like. Because there's different degrees, there's different sounds within the genre and even within the era.
Of course.
One thing that's interesting, I think, about this album came out in 94, but the band started in 84. And they're one of these bands that kind of bridged the first wave and second wave of black metal. And they kind of have a uniqueness to them because of that. Not only that, but like we mentioned at the beginning, the album is shrouded in controversy and odd events. And one of those things is multiple lineup changes, multiple vocalists and multiple, change-ups and stuff like that. And the vast majority of this album was written by Per Olin, dead, and he died by suicide before this album was even released. There's just so much stuff going into it. That makes me as a listener very intrigued by it. And I think there's a bit of a bonus there because there's so much uniqueness surrounding it, so much story and lore surrounding this album that as a listener, I'm more into it because of that. And I think that might be a little bit unfair because an album that didn't have all that lore and the murders and the church burnings and all that stuff kind of fueling the hype behind this, albums that wouldn't have that probably wouldn't get the same attention as this one did. With that said, I thought this was a pretty decent album. And I think the most notable things to take away are the percussion from Hellhammer and the vocals from Attila, who was, I think, their fourth or fifth vocalist, maybe sixth vocalist at this time. I don't even know. But the reason I say Attila is not because the vocals were good particularly, but they are interesting. And
That's a good way of putting it.
I'm sure you'll have your comments about the vocals.
That's a good way
but
of
they
putting
are
it.
very interesting. And they're also not consistent. It's not the same style throughout the whole thing. There's different types of things going on. And yeah, you got...
I will give them that.
The opening track, Funeral Fog, it's raw and aggressive are probably the common ways people would describe it. Feral is a way I would describe it. It feels very like one take and done kind of thing. Like,
I mean, he just sounds more like he needs some more fiber in his system.
he does sound a little disgruntled, but it's intentional. It's intentionally uncomfortable. And I think they intended for that. Well, that's what intentionally means. So they meant to do it, and I think they did that well. It's off kilter, but it adds to the vibe. Okay, it's hard to really explain what it is, but there's something about it, as bad as it is objectively, there's something about it that's attractive. So
it's a difficult game to play though when you're trying to do stuff poorly on purpose. You're really running the risk of it just not working for some people.
Exactly.
Darkthrone's album was a good example of that, right?
That's right.
And it didn't work for us.
It didn't work for us. This is, I think, in a different realm of poorly on purpose than Darkthrone was.
Yeah.
So, even the end of the song, Funeral Fog, when he says the title of the song, I don't know if you caught it or paid attention to it, but the way he says the title of the song, he drags out the word funeral. He's like when he's singing it, then he goes, fog. And he just spits out the word fog. And he does that 4 times, but they're all different each time he does it. At first I was like, what the fuck is he doing? But as the week went on, I was like, that's just really cool. I don't know why I'm so into that, but I really like that part. It made that song worth listening to till the end. Then you got Freezing Moon, which is by far the most song played on this album. Has over 22 million listens on Spotify, which the next most one has like, what, 8 million or 9 million?
It's under 10, I know
Under
that.
10, yeah. So this is a song that they still play in their set list when they do play today. It's the only song I've ever added to my playlist up until recently. I did add another song through this week as we're reviewing this album. But I just feel like this song is authentically metal. It's just authentically metal. And that's something that this band and this scene, the Norwegian black metal scene, was something that they were always striving for, was just being true to the scene, true to the genre, and not swaying so much, and, you know, having that whole counterculture type of mindset and vibe, right? I think Freezing Mood evokes all of that very well. It's great percussion-wise, the riffs are fine, it just is an overall cool song.
Yeah, I think musically that's really like the peak. Like I think musically this album is very good throughout, but I feel like they
Freezing
really
Moon is the peak.
The peak of that is Freezing Moon.
Right. So just, I guess I'll talk about one more song before I pass the floor over to you, because I'm curious of what your thoughts are as well. The other song I added to my playlist was Life Eternal.
Okay.
So this is a song that, you know, I knew a bit of the history behind this song. This song was the last song written by Dead. It was left beside his body when he commits suicide, and he even had a note in his suicide note that said, "This is my gift to you guys."
Yeah,
right?
like the lyrics to that song. And
Yeah.
it's like when you listen to that song and read the lyrics with that in mind, it's like, it really changes the experience.
It's deep, and it changes your perspective and all that stuff. So the odd thing about it, and I mentioned the singing, how it's kind of different throughout the album, it's kind of unique, and it's kind of, you know, odd and different things. There's actually some attempt at some melodic singing on this song. And I thought that was really out of place, and I started wondering what's actually going on. And I kind of don't really see it as an attempt at singing, but almost it feels like somebody who's like empty inside trying to grasp at trying to be human. Like it's hard to explain, but Dead was rumored to have this condition called Cotard syndrome or Cotard delusion. And that's a delusion or a symptom that, or a disease, I don't know what it is. Sorry, I'm not a doctor, but it's a condition, I guess you could say, that some people have that makes them think they are a corpse. Literally, they're a walking dead person. They don't have life inside of them, and they firmly believe this with all their being. And Per Olin had this. He thought he was not a living person. He thought he should be among the dead. He belonged with the dead. And, you know, that explains a lot of his behaviors and his mannerisms and his obsessions with death.
And his
like this.
nickname.
And his nickname.
Dead.
So I'm wondering if the vocals in this song are kind of a reference to that. And this guy's singing as if he's a corpse trying to become human. So he's attempting at some melody. He's attempting at singing something that's bright and beautiful, but it just does not come across that way. It's a weird kind of take I'm having on it, but it made me feel some sort of way. And I thought that was really interesting. I like the vocals. Again, this is another thing where, as objectively bad as they were doing something for me that I was attracted to. Another point about the song that's not related to vocals is I really like that there's some parts of the song where the bass line carries the groove. That stood out to me as well. So again, at the beginning of the week, I was like, okay, this is just another song. But the more I listened to it and the more I started kind of dissecting it with my, you know, opinion, it just started growing on me and blossoming on me, and it became a playlist song. So I thought that was really cool. And, you know, that's it. Let's pass the floor.
I would say that is one of the more notable songs from this album for me, but I wish that I had the same experience that you did with these vocals. It just didn't work for me. And I feel like it's really it is the weakest link, because like I said, musically, this album's really good. Like, a song comes on, you hear some cool riff, a bunch of different riffs, you got a cool bass line here, a cool drum fill there, a lot of cool stuff going on, a pretty neat, whatever, kind of shreddy guitar solo, but these vocals are just, like, it honestly was a bit cringe-inducing for me in some points. So, like, there's a scream he does in Life Eternal at, like, the 2:10 mark. I'm hearing this just like, oh, God, just, like, And it sucks because it kind of just takes me out of the songs at times, where it's like I hear some part that just sounds really rough, and I'm just like, oh, God. You know what I mean? In some songs, it's a bit more, it's a bit, you know, better, but there's I guess one part I will mention. There's this, in the middle of Cursed in Eternity, there's this scream that happens and there's a gong in the background. Loved that. Every time that happens, I'm like, yeah, there's the gong with the scream, yeah. Like, I actually didn't hate it. Part of it's probably because, like, wow, here's this cool gong. That's a cool thing that they're doing. But I feel like for this album, a lot of the enjoyability for me to kind of suggest this album to someone is like, if you can handle these vocals, you'll love the album. You know what I mean? I feel like that's like, at least for me, the main hurdle to get over is like, can I adapt to these vocals? In some cases, kind of, in some cases, not. You mentioned that this album bridges the gap between first and second wave black metal, and I agree, because I feel like a lot of the performance of this album, a lot of the composition of this album is very similar to what we've heard from first wave bands like Darkthrone, but sonically, mix-wise, it sounds like what you'd hear out of second wave. So it's like a first wave band playing in second wave, which is kind of the case because this band is from the first wave.
Yeah.
Like, in terms of their existence.
I see.
So I think it's a really cool way to bridge that gap between them is through this album.
Yeah.
So yeah, I actually really liked it, like, as a kind of a first impression when I first heard the record. I'm like, you know what? There's some really cool musical stuff here. But as I was listening to it more, the vocals were kind of just taking me out of songs more often than not. But it's funny that you mentioned that Life Eternal was the one where you thought you heard, you know, more melodic singing there.
It wasn't the only song.
Okay, I was about to bring that up. The title track has a lot of operatic style singing.
It does.
And I actually don't hate it. Like, I'm like, you know what? It sounds fine for what he's doing here, and I think it's a unique thing on the album. Does not happen on any other song. I like that, and I like that there's a uniqueness there. So
Sounds like he's crying on that song, though. Like, it sounds like blubbering crying.
Oh, I see the vibe. I see what
Like,
you mean.
he's like, it's the most despair a person could be in, and he's just singing while he's just completely just wrecked.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's like a lot of the singing aspects of this album I found were iffy, but that I liked. But it's like you look at, like, you know, Funeral Fog, the way that it starts, it's with the vocals just like he's taking a massive dump. It's really what it sounds like.
I literally think it was one take and done, and he just went up there and just had the lyrics in front of him and just did it.
Just went.
And just improv the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's how it was, and they went, okay, that's it, we're done.
They're like, yeah, no, that sounds good. Yeah, they're good. So it's like, okay, fine. But yeah, so basically those four tracks, Freezing Moon, which we already talked about, Cursed in Eternity, as I mentioned, Life Eternal, and the title track are the four main tracks that really stood out for me. Everything else was fine, but didn't really have anything that jumped out in terms of like
Pagan Fears? Pagan Fears is pretty good.
It's the kind of track where if I think about it, I'll be like, well, I didn't have any notes.
Yeah.
Didn't really have anything to say.
It's interesting, because I felt that way about Cursed in Eternity. I didn't have any notes for that one. It didn't do much for me.
No gong?
It didn't do much for me, yeah. But Pagan Fears, like the intro riff on that, I'm like, okay, this is like, let's talk about riffs for a second. I think the riffs are probably one of the weakest things on this album. You said vocals. I think the riffs on this album are boring and just didn't do anything. I think Euronymous was just maybe not a good guitar player or something, I don't know, but also I read that he doesn't play the solos either. Somebody, I guess, guitarist played all the solos on this album, not that they're anything special anyway.
I like them.
But yeah, they're fine, but there's nothing to write home about. But yeah, the riffs I found, if the riffs were a little bit stronger, a little bit more memorable, a little bit more eventful, then I think this album would have gone a lot further with me. I think Pagan Fears has the best riffs on the album, which is why it stood out to me maybe. And I liked that it had a bit of a mood shift when the music changes and it was switching back and forth between, you know, one section and another section. And then they introduced the double bass at one point. It just had a lot of cool components to it to make the song. So I thought that was pretty cool. But I also find it really interesting that songs that I liked, you didn't like, and songs that you liked, I didn't like, which is awesome. And I love the fact that we have that dynamic here. I'm just gonna ask you flat out, Buried by Time and Dust, track number 7. What were your thoughts on that? Because that was a dud to me too.
Nothing.
Okay, so at least we agree on that.
We agree on that.
We agree on that.
I had no notes. I have no, like, you'd have to show me the song and be like, how'd that one go?
Yeah. So anyways, I think I'm ready to rate the album now that
same.
we've said a bunch of stuff about it.
Let's rate it.
So for me, there's, again, 2 songs that are in the playlist, a bunch of songs that I think are pretty good, and then 2 songs that I think are kind of duds. With all of that said, this is objectively a bad album. Musically, it's just not that good. The musicianship is fine. It's okay. I'm being a little bit extreme with my words. But I still think that there's a lot of personality there, and a lot of character, and there's a lot of creativity in there. There's a lot of heart in there. As much as they might hate hearing me say that, there's a lot of heart in there. Maybe they'll say it's a black heart.
Ooh.
But there's a lot of good stuff going for it, despite how raunchy it might sound. So for me, it's a 6.
All right, fair enough. As for myself, I feel like this album had a lot of cool stuff in it in terms of its content. And you know what? I will give credit where it's due. There is personality to this album.
Yes.
100%. It's not like a whatever run-of-the-mill album. You put it on and you can really kind of get the vibe out of, everyone's performance. However, I feel like the vocals just did not work. I feel like it's definitely an acquired taste as well. I wouldn't say like most people can just throw this album on and love the vocal performance. You really have to kind of dig it. So it's difficult in that sense, but musically I do think there's some cool stuff in there and good performances. It's getting a 5.5 from me.
That's pretty close to a 6.
It is.
We almost got similar scores.
Anyway, guys, that's all we got for this entire week of black metal anniversary reviews. We hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did. Lots of evil going around at Halloween time, as one would expect.
Yep.
Anyway, remember to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us what you think of Mayhem. What is the best album? Is it this one? Is it a different one? We'd love to hear what you guys have to say. And subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. I'm TV Fish.
I'm Vile Self.
And keep the horns up.